Jeff serves currently as our area governor. Today, Jeff starts the interpretive reading manual off project number 1. Read a story. His purpose is to present a narrative using vocal techniques that help the audience to understand and enjoy this lecture. Please welcome Jeff with his speech titled Action Not Words.
In great deed, something abides. On great fields, something stays. Forms change and pass. Bodies disappear, but spirits linger to consecrate ground for the vision place of the soul. And reverent men and women from afar, and generations that know us not, and that we know not of, shall come here to ponder and to dream, and the power of the vision shall pass into their souls. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, 1828 to 1914. I'll be reading this morning from The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews. What makes the difference between failure and success? 46-year-old David Ponder feels like a total failure. Once a high-flying executive in a Fortune 500 company, he now works a part-time minimum wage job. His wife makes more money than he does by cleaning houses, and he drives an old car with a mismatched fender and a heater that no longer works. Then an even greater crisis hits. His daughter becomes ill, and he can't afford to get her the medical help she needs. When his car skids on an icy road, he wonders if he even cares to survive the crash. But an extraordinary experience awaits David Ponder. He finds himself traveling back in time, meeting leaders and heroes at crucial moments in their lives. From the European theater of World War II to an ancient Middle Eastern king's throne room, from a Civil War battlefield to a warehouse in heaven, David encounters some of the wisest people who ever lived. Abraham Lincoln, King Solomon, Anne Frank, Harry Truman, and others teach him unforgettable life lessons. By the time his amazing journey is over, he has received 7 secrets for success and a second chance to create a life worth living, no matter what opposition or obstacles he might face. The Traveler's Gift offers a modern-day parable of one man's choices and the attitudes that make the difference between success and failure. And we'll pick up where David Ponder has just met Colonel Chamberlain at Gettysburg. David stepped up beside the colonel. "Why did you choose this place to defend?" "I didn't choose it," Chamberlain said dryly. "Colonel Vincent placed me here this morning." "Why did he place you here?" David pressed. "We are at the extreme left of the Union Army. The 83rd Pennsylvania is formed on our right, but to our left, nothing. We are the end of a line that runs from here all the way back to Gettysburg. That means I cannot withdraw. If the Confederate Army flanks us, if the Rebs overrun us, they'll come in behind our cannons and barricades, and the Army of the Potomac will be forfeit. 80,000 men caught from the back on a downhill charge with no protection, and if it happens, it will have come through me." "There is something I am to learn from you," David pleaded. "I am sure of it. Think, what could it be?" The colonel smiled slightly and raised his eyebrows. Turning to David, he said, "I'm a professor of rhetoric. I'm fairly certain I have nothing you would care to learn. I am a teacher with a cause in my heart and men to lead. These poor men. Their leader has no real knowledge of warfare or tactics. I am only a stubborn man, Ponder. That is my greatest advantage in this fight. I have deep within me the inability to do nothing. I may die today, but I will not die with a bullet in my back. I will not die in retreat." Just then, Sergeant Tozier was there, the hard-nosed old soldier who carried the battle flag. Tozier had a thick wad of torn cloth stuck into a hole in his shoulder where he had been wounded earlier. "No help from the 83rd, he growled. "They're shot to ribbons. All they can do is extend the line a bit. We're getting murdered on the flank." "Can we extend?" Chamberlain asked. "There's nothing to extend, Joshua," his brother Tom answered. "Over half our men are down." "How are we for ammunition?" "We've been shooting a lot." "I know we've been shooting a lot. I want to know how we're holding out." "I'll check, sir." As Tom moved off, a voice came from a young soldier who had climbed a tree. "They're forming again, Colonel." Chamberlain looked up to see the boy pointing downhill. "They're forming up right now," he said, "and they've been reinforced. There's more of them this time." "Sir!" Sergeant Earl Thomas, out of breath, stumbled into their midst. "Colonel Chamberlain, sir! Sir! Colonel Vincent is dead." Are you sure, Sergeant? Yes, sir. He was shot right at the first of the fight. We were firmed up by Weed's brigade in the front, but now Weed is dead. They moved Hazlitt's battery up top. Hazlitt's dead too. Tom came running back. Joshua, he said, we're out. 1, 2 rounds per man at the most. Some of the men have nothing at all. Chamberlain turned to a thin man standing to his right. It was First Sergeant Ellis Spear. Spear, he said calmly, tell the boys to take ammunition from the wounded and dead. Maybe we should think about pulling out, sir, Spear said cautiously. We will not be pulling out, Sergeant, Chamberlain replied grimly. Carry out my orders, please. Colonel, Tozier spoke up. Sir, we won't hold them again. You know we won't. Joshua, it was Tom speaking again. Here they come. David had been listening to the exchange between the officers, fascinated by the horror of their situation. But when he heard the rebel yells coursing up through the trees, his blood turned icy cold. Chamberlain was standing in full view on top of the wall, his arms crossed, staring down at the advancing army. Sergeant Spear had returned and was standing at his colonel's feet. Tozier, Tom, and another lieutenant, a boy named Melcher, were also bunched below. David stood several feet behind the group. Joshua, Tom shouted, give an order. Chamberlain remained stoic. Deep in thought, he was quickly sorting out the situation. We can't retreat, he said to himself. We can't stay here. When I'm faced with the choice of doing nothing or doing something, I will always choose to act. I am a person of action. Turning his back to the rebels, he looked down at his men. Fix bayonets, he said. At first, no one moved. They simply stared at him with open mouths. We'll have the advantage of moving downhill, Chamberlain said. Fix bayonets now. Execute a great white wheel of the entire regiment. Swing the left first. Lieutenant Melcher spoke up. He was confused. Sir, what's a great white wheel? But the colonel had already jumped from the rocks. Tozier answered the question. He means to charge, son. A great white wheel is an all-out charge. David watched in awe as Chamberlain drew his sword, leapt up on the wall again and screamed, bayonets! Bayonets! Turning, the colonel pointed the sword directly at David and slightly bowed his head. Then he wheeled to face the overwhelming odds and slashed his blade through the air. With a power born of righteousness and fear, the school teacher from Maine roared, charge! 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 to his men. And they did. Tumbling over the wall, the men who were left rose their voices to meet the voice of the leader. Charge! They cried. Charge! Charge! David rushed to the wall, looking downhill. He was stunned to see the advanced Confederate force stop in its tracks. Almost immediately, the soldiers turned and ran. A few of the braver souls emptied their rifles before dropping them to follow the rest. About 70 yards down the slope, David caught sight of Chamberlain. He had his left hand on the trunk of a tree, and in his right, he held the sword, the point of which was resting on the collarbone of a rebel officer. The man had his hands up. It was over.
Looks like a good book for bedtime stories for my son. I'll borrow that book. As a reminder,